Welcome into The Whistle. I'm Jackson James. We got a full action-packed episode. Let's hop right into it, starting with contenders or pretenders. This is the segment in which I dissect some of the teams that played this past week and see if their performance was redeeming of the qualities of being a contender for not only the playoffs, but a Super Bowl or a pretender. Teams that may be good, but are actually not. So let's start with our first team on the list, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, they lost to the New York Jets. And that's a pretty brutal loss, but they've been kind of suspect for a little bit, with their close victories here or there, especially against Washington. That was a close victory. So it's definitely a team to keep an eye on for sure. But I think, yes, they're still a contender. You got to look at the NFC. There's maybe 4 teams there that are true contenders, not only for the playoffs, but the Super Bowl or also the NFC East or NFC crown. But speaking of which, in the NFC, you got the 49ers. They also lost to the Cleveland Browns. I would say their loss, though, was better than the Eagles. I think that's a fair comparison just because they lost some of their key players to injuries, and you can't necessarily grade that performance truthfully on the 49ers. We'll get into some report card later on, but I would still say they are a contender after this loss. They didn't necessarily get exposed. I think Brock Purdy showed some qualities of if he doesn't have his full cast, he might struggle a little bit. It might be easier to stop that offense, especially if Christian McCaffrey is out. He's the key to that offense. They could lose a Debo, they could lose a Brandon Ayuk, they could lose a George Kittle, but as long as they have CMC, they'll be chilling. So yeah, they're still a contender. Going on to Buffalo, who struggled to pull out a victory against the New York Giants. This one's actually a very tricky one because Buffalo has shown that they can beat some of the best teams like Miami, for instance, and blow them out, yet they struggle at home on primetime football against the New York Giants with Tyrod Taylor playing quarterback. So I have this one as a pretender. I think they are just too inconsistent, especially Josh Allen's play, for them to be a true contender. We saw that last year in the playoffs when they played the Bengals in the divisional round. Josh Allen did not perform well. And now, if the game's a toss-up, he might play well in the wild card round, but play bad in the divisional round. Or he'll play good in the divisional round, but play bad in the conference championship game. It's something like that. He has the capability of playing top tier quarterback levels, but I just haven't seen that in back to back or in a span of games. So that's why I have Buffalo as a pretender. Going on to Jacksonville, they had another win. This one in America after their 2 games in London, and they defeated as I'm trying to look here on my notes, they defeated the Colts. They defeated the Colts 37-20 in a pretty convincing victory. And I predicted this in my Lucky Four last week and my picks last week, just because this Jacksonville team is starting to click on all of their cylinders. Their defense is playing well enough for their offense to kind of take a backseat, even though Trevor Lawrence is starting to get back into his form. A little rust to start the season. Can't necessarily blame him. Preseason, off season, they got to wipe that rust off a little bit. So now is when you're going to really start to see these teams get into their full potential. And that's where I think the Jags are right now. They're playing their best football right now. And so they're a contender for right now. An injury, too, could definitely wipe this team out from being a contender into a pretender. But for right now, they're going to win their division. And they may have a chance at that top seed if some of the other teams, like a Kansas City, maybe drop a game or 2 here and there. Going on to Houston, this team is very sneaky. I predicted them to come in 3rd in the AFC South, below the Jags and the Titans, but they have very much surprised me. CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in his draft class so far, and they are greatly coached by DeMeco Ryans. He is a guy that I think I see the potential in and could be a very good coach once he sort of gets his roster in place, because they're very young, yet they're still competitive, which you love to see. And you see other teams, maybe like the Bears, that are kind of young, but they struggle. So you don't see that with the Texans, especially CJ Stroud. He's been balling. This team right now is really good, and they could be a sneaky team. I think they're a contender for the playoffs, not the Super Bowl, but the playoffs. So that gets a check mark from me because expectations for them were maybe 6 wins, 7 wins. Now they have a chance to win their division. I don't think they will, but maybe sneak in on that wild card if they keep up their decent play. They got some tough games coming up, but I could see them definitely, stringing and upsetting some teams, which will be huge, especially because I think that 7th seed is going to come down to like 4 teams. I think there's a high potential that a 10-7 or a 9-8 will be good enough to make the AFC playoffs at that 7th seed. So we'll have to see how Houston continues their winning ways. Going down to the final 2 teams, I have the Cincinnati Bengals and the New York Jets. I think I have vastly different opinions on these teams. I think the Jets are a contender and the Bengals are a pretender. And here's why I'll compare these 2 teams. Going into the season, they both had high hopes. Their goal was not only to make the playoffs, but maybe contend for an AFC championship. Obviously, week 1, vastly different predictions for the season. Everyone was like, oh, Bengals start slow. They might go 0-2, but they'll get it back together. We still haven't seen that. Whereas the Jets, once Aaron Rodgers goes down, you're all like, oh, season's over. Well, you've seen the rehab he's going through. He might be back before the regular season ends. And Cincinnati, there's just no spark to them. There's nothing redeeming about the Bengals right now to say they are a contender. Whereas the Jets, they have a Super Bowl caliber defense. They do. Right? And they could even potentially make the playoffs with Zach Wilson. Now, that's a little bold, I know that, but there's still a chance for the Jets to maybe get to like a 6-4 record when Aaron Rodgers comes back, and he can push them in December, January to make that playoff seed. We'll have to see, though. But I'm way more high on the Jets after defeating the Eagles than the Bengals were after defeating the Seahawks. The Bengals have a lot of things to figure out offensively. 17 points with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and all of those weapons. I don't have to get into it, but they are clearly struggling. Defensive side of the ball, 13 points against the Seahawks. That's great, but I also think that's more of a problem with the Seahawks. But I'm not going to discredit the Bengals there. They put a great defensive performance on, and that's why they ultimately won that game. Can they keep that up? We'll have to see, especially against teams like Buffalo. Buffalo may have struggled, but they still have an explosive offense. Miami, their offense is the best in the league. Can they hang in with them? And can they hang with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs like they have in years past? We'll have to see. I don't like how they're looking right now. So that'll end it for contenders or pretenders. I didn't cover every team because every team didn't necessarily have that spectacular of a victory. I think teams that I may have missed out on were the Lions. I think they are a contender. I didn't want to get too much into them because I feel like that's kind of obvious. You have games with the Rams, they won, but do you necessarily see them as a contender? I don't as of right now. Cooper Kupp is back, so that could be something very powerful for the Rams going forward. He's back to Triple Crown form. But there's also teams that lost where it's just like, oh, it's obvious. Like the Patriots, they're not a contender. Tennessee, they're not a contender. So I'll take it week by week. I might not do this segment next week just because it might be a little repetitive, but we'll have to see. If a team wins and pulls off an upset, I might have to consider them as a contender because if they're capable of winning now, who says they're not capable of winning later on? So anyways, that takes us into our next segment, some front page football news. Let's start this off. The Browns defeated the 49ers as they controlled their offense throughout the entire game. This game was shocking, to say the least, just because the 49ers at that point were the best team in the league. There was no other team that you could say was better. Just no QB. All right, okay, I would take that back. There was no, better playing QB almost. You could say a Tua playing better than Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy hasn't turned over the football all year until this game. You have the best running back in football who scored in every game. He scored in this one too, so the streak continues to, I think, 15 games, which is just insane. So this was very shocking to see the Browns with a backup quarterback at home, which I think was a huge advantage, to beat the 49ers. Just absolutely insane. This Browns defense, though, is incredible. I think this is actually a very sneaky defense, too, right? It caught the 49ers definitely off guard, and you wouldn't consider the Browns defense to be this good. And yeah, it could be maybe a one-game thing, but I think they're good enough to carry a team, right? Especially in this game, which they did. P.J. Walker threw 2 interceptions and almost practically gave the game to the 49ers, yet their defense was able to not only fluster Brock Purdy, but also hold their offense just kind of out of field goal range, which Jake Moody missed 2 field goals. He's on my fantasy team. I'm mad about that. But ultimately, this was a great game to watch. It came down to the end. The 49ers had a chance and their kicker blew it. Ultimately, should have the 49ers won this game? You could say that, but I don't think you can say against a backup quarterback it should come down to a game-winning field goal, right? And I think that's the very point here is that their game should not have gone that way. They are clearly the better team. They have the better quarterback, they have the better coaching, and they have the better defense. So there's no reason why the Browns should have won this game, yet they did. And the Browns are surprising me a little bit. I predicted them to come last in the North, yet they are performing better than the Bengals are. And there's somewhere that people are saying they're performing better than the Steelers, and I could argue that. I think I like their offensive potential more than the Steelers, especially if Deshaun comes healthy. They have a real weapon in Amari Cooper, who absolutely had a snag in that game. That was an incredible catch. And they are just really well coached by Kevin Stefanski right now. And I'm really interested to see how this team continues their season because they have potential with how their division is playing right now to win that division. I think the Ravens are the team to beat right now. So it should be interesting to see how the Browns perform if they continue this performance defensively throughout the season. Going on to the next headline, we got the Lions take control of the North, the NFC North, and become real contenders not only to win their division, but also the NFC. Obviously, they are in first place in their division. They are going to win that division. I predicted them to, and I think everyone else did. This is their year, and right now they're playing like a true contender. They played as the best team in the NFC this week. No ifs, ands, or buts. They played better than the 49ers, played better than the Eagles. This was filmed before the Cowboys game, so it's really clear to see that the Lions aren't necessarily the favorite, yet they can still play a vital role. I think for them right now, their goals for the season are not only to make the playoffs now, but to win a playoff game. They are very capable. They have a great quarterback. Jared Goff's been playing out of his mind. Good coaching all around. And they have a good enough defense. They have playmakers on defense to win those games if it comes down to it. And their division is very easy this year. They play the Bears. They're not good. They have to play the Vikings. They're not good. And they already defeated the Packers once, and they destroyed them. Who says they can't do that again? Especially with the Green Bay struggles at quarterback right now. Jordan Love's not playing his best ball. So it'll be very crucial for the Lions to not only keep winning, but keep up the momentum, right? They were kind of underdogs. Their fans are really starting to buy in, and this team's dangerous right now. I would not want to play them right now. If I was any team in the league, I don't care if you're San Francisco, Philadelphia, or Kansas City. The Lions right now are the team to beat because they are playing the best ball in the league. Going on to the AFC side, you got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Kansas City Chiefs. Which team is hotter? Now, yes, Kansas City did beat Jacksonville, but there's been a little bit of not up to par performance by the Chiefs. They barely got past the Broncos. That's actually not the right wording I want to use. They got past the Broncos. Not the cleanest performance. There's been some offensive struggles with them, and the Jacksonville had some offensive struggles early, but now they're starting to kind of feel their groove. So if they were to play it again now, who would you put your money on? Do I think these are the best two teams in the AFC? No. I think they're two of the hottest teams, though. Chiefs haven't lost since week 1. They now have the longest winning streak in the league. And Jacksonville has stringed together 3 victories in a row, I think. Could be 4. And so they are definitely elevating to another level. Both the teams are in the driving seat in their divisions to win. Obviously, Jacksonville's the AFC South is easier to win. Then you could say the AFC West, even though the Raiders are underperforming, Chargers are underperforming, and the Broncos are terrible. So both these teams have a clear path forward to the playoffs. So I would love to see a rematch again because earlier in the season, I would have loved this game to be a week 14, week 15, whereas teams are really hitting full stride for the playoffs rather than a week 3 matchup in which Kansas City is just playing better, and they are the better team, yet Jacksonville now could easily contend, and I think ultimately win a home game against the Chiefs if that were to happen in the playoffs. That's why that loss was huge, and that's why I hated it at the beginning of the season, because it just doesn't encapsulate the team at that moment, right? No one would say the Cowboys are the same team they are week 1 and 2 after defeating nobodies. Actually, well, the Jets have very respectable, and we will get into that a little bit later, but they've beat kind of underperforming teams at that point. And you have teams like the 49ers who have been great all season so far, but then drop a game against the Browns with a backup quarterback. The league is very confusing. You see the teams that are at the top fall a little bit. And so I think these two teams, very different paths to this week, yet I think they are at the very same level right now. So I would love to see another rematch. And finally, the final front page football news. We got some new starting quarterbacks coming up in week 7. You got the Bears. Justin Fields goes down. I need to look at who their backup quarterback is. Justin Fields on my fantasy team absolutely let me down. Had Jared Goff on the bench. It's a whole ordeal, and I'm very disappointed in him, especially after a great week against Washington. How do you drop that egg with a week extended? Man, that was just awful. Minnesota's not that good, especially with JJ out. It was just, eye rollers. Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill went down with an ankle injury. We saw a little bit of Malik Willis. Wasn't good enough for them to get the victory. They were still in it, though. Tennessee, if I was a Tennessee fan, I'd be so frustrated because you are good enough. You got good coaching. Mike Vrabel's a good coach. Yet, it's just your roster, your quarterback, especially even if Ryan Tannehill is, and I still don't feel comfortable in that. So we might see Malik Willis or Will Levis next week. New York Giants, Tyrod Taylor. If Tyrod Taylor comes back, that would be an interesting matchup. They play let me look this up real quick. But he played decent against the Bills. Not anything super spectacular, only 9 points. They kind of had to set a little bit in the red zone, had a second or at the end of the first half blunder, which really set them back. They probably would have won that game if that doesn't happen. And then you got Atlanta with Riddler. Does he keep the starting job? I mean, probably if he's staying now, right? Kind of have to think, but he had a horrible performance, and they definitely need to look for a quarterback. So it'll be a very, very interesting as the Bears play the Raiders next week, which could be winnable with a backup quarterback. And then Tennessee is actually, looks like they might be on a bye next week. So that's good for them. Get Ryan Tannehill healthy, because I do think he is the best quarterback on that roster. So unless you want to, I think you're better off going with a Will Levis rather than a Malik Davis, just because of the arm talent there. But I'm not the coach, I'm not the GM, so I don't really know what's the difference between them. I'm surprised Malik Willis made the roster after some training camp news that Will Levis was playing better. So we'll have to see how that quarterback, but we got some new QBs. I'm excited to see how they could do, if they can lead their teams to victory in week 7. My money's on probably no. Anyways, that transitions us to our biggest segment of today's episode. We got a little report card action. Your team either got an A, B, C, D, or an F. If you won, you don't have a passing, or if you lost, you don't have a passing grade. And if you won, you at least got a C. So let's dissect the A group, the teams that won, but also did a lot more than just win. We have Cleveland, Jacksonville, Miami, the Rams, and the New York Jets. The only surprising one here, for my sake, would be the Rams. Only 26-9, yet it's still a division rival. And you're at home, you handle business, won by 3 possessions. That's an A-plus performance. Ultimately, you would like to see maybe a little bit of more offensive fireworks. And I would say, next week's going to be a struggle if Kyren Williams is out. The New York Jets won against the Eagles. Nobody predicted them to beat the Eagles, yet they did. You would say you would like to see more of an offensive game. You could downgrade it to a B, but I think just of the moment and the team, they needed that win, and they need maybe 1 or 2 more wins like that moving forward if they want to make the playoffs in time for Aaron Rodgers to come back. Cleveland beating 49ers, that's great. And Jacksonville destroying an opponent within the same division is always going to be an A+ from me. Moving on to the B's, we have Detroit, Cincinnati, Washington, Houston, Las Vegas, Baltimore, and Kansas City. They played on Thursday. I've talked about them a little bit. You won at home against a division opponent, division rival. That gets you a B. You would have liked to see a little bit more offense from them. Maybe I could have given them a C, but I think that's too harsh on them. Baltimore, getting back from their loss against Pittsburgh, which was embarrassing from the offensive standpoint. They dropped 24 against the Tennessee Titans. That'll give them a C or a B. You would like to see, just kind of they should dominate that game. Yet Tennessee is one of those teams that is sneaky and will always fight. So ultimately, I'll give them a B. Las Vegas, this one's just kind of like an eye roller game because they played the Patriots and they still won without Jimmy Garoppolo in that second half against a Bill Belichick team in the second half without your starting quarterback to win. That at least gets you a B in my eyes. Going on to Houston, they won. They're continuing to stay hot. They beat the Saints 20-13. The Saints have an underrated defense for sure. The reason I give this a B is just it doesn't sit right with me that the Saints are that good of a team, right? And if Houston, could light some fireworks, I would like to see them, a CJ Stroud game for sure, like just pure, absolutely balled out. That's the gray area with these grades. What's the difference between an A and a B, right? Detroit, they should get an A. Well, they get a B, and here's why. Tampa Bay, actually no, scratch that. I have them as B. I'm bumping them up to an A. They dominated that game. You would like to see a little bit more offensive consistency. It was close to begin the game, but then they pulled away. But I just thought of it. Tampa Bay had a bye. So to beat a team coming off a bye, you're at least getting an A if you win. So that's why I have to give Detroit. Cincinnati, they barely escaped against Seattle. Not the best performance, but not anything C-worthy. They were on the road, I think, for that one. So that's obviously a very impressive win. And they needed to get back-to-back wins for sure. Create some momentum, especially as we get into the thick of the NFL season. Washington went into Atlanta and gave Riddler his first home loss since high school or ever, I don't know, but that was still a great dub. Their defense is very good. That's what won them the game. So I'd like to see, a little bit more of an offensive dominating game from them. They were in it, or they dominated against the Broncos, but they should have lost that game almost because their defense gave up some hullabaloo, Hail Mary. Anyways, that's not the point. Here's the Washington. It's just like there wasn't necessarily, you can walk away and say this was a flawless game. So that's why I've given it a B, and that ends the B segment. The C's goes to Buffalo and Minnesota. The Bears are bad and the Giants are bad. Both those teams should dominate them offensively. I guess the only excuse would be Minnesota not having, Justin Jefferson yet. I still think that Minnesota is capable offensively. They clearly had the better quarterback, and they had probably the better wide receivers, in the game. Even with DJ Moore, I still think Minnesota uses their wide receivers better running back, just a better team, and yet they only won by 6. That doesn't sit right, even though it was on the road against a division rival. That might be hypocritical, but I feel like there's just something missing from Minnesota. And I was watching that game, and it was just like the Bears' backup quarterback got them back into the game. That can't happen as a Vikings fan or even a player. Like, that can't happen. We cannot allow that to happen. So that's my one problem with them. And then Buffalo, they should have probably lost that game against the Giants. Like, there's no excuse. You're at home, prime time, wearing your alternate red jerseys, playing against a backup quarterback, and you almost lost. That is a C. It's a passing grade. You got the W. You move on. You'll forget about this game for sure, but it's definitely a little bit of a head scratcher. And I talked about this in the contenders or pretenders, but Buffalo, you got to get some things together, man. Going into our D's and F's, we'll keep this quick because they lost. In the D's, we have the Saints, Colts, Carolina, New York Giants, Atlanta Falcons, and Philadelphia Eagles. The reason why the Eagles are in this, when you think, oh, they lost, should be an F. They just made some uncharacteristic mistakes. Like, I don't think this is the Philadelphia team we'll see later on in the year, right? I think they'll, really hone in on offense. And they played a great defense in the Jets and gave Jalen Hurts some fits. And I'd much rather have a loss now than in late November, December, where the season's like, okay, we figured out our identity. Whereas I think there may be some turmoil within that Philadelphia offense. A.J. Brown's been asking for the ball, and I think he's had 4 straight games of 100-plus receiving yards, which is good. Yet I feel like they should be a run-first team, and they weren't able to do that against the Jets, which really held them back. Only 14 points offensively. That's not a fail. I think a fail would have been just not able to control this game at all. At the Jets straight, out of the gate, take control. But no, that's not what happened. They controlled the game all the way up until the 4th quarter and then just dropped it. That's not the worst performance ever. But this, as a Philly fan, I would be absolutely saying, oh, this was a fail. We stunk. This is just awful. But I'm not. So I think I'll give them a D. A team that got an F performance was the 49ers. Clearly I talked about it. They're the better team. Arizona, you can't get destroyed like that against a division rival. Patriots, you're just bad. Chicago, just lackluster offensively. I know you came back and you only lost by 6, but that's with the backup quarterback. Justin Fields should have kept that game closer and should have been better offensively. You weren't. Seattle Seahawks, you can't score 13 points as an offensive-led team and lose. You just can't. You need to score more than 13 points, especially with a veteran like Geno Smith and good weapons. Kenneth Walker III is absolutely balling out. He's a touchdown machine lately. And you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And you just drafted a wide receiver in the first round in Jackson Smith-Njigba. You cannot do that performance against a Bengals team that's been struggling a little bit. So you just can't do that. That's why they have an F. Tampa Bay, coming off a bye, only scoring 6 points. That's horrible. And Denver against Kansas City. Your offense just looks inept. It looks horrendous. And especially against, look, it's hard to play in Kansas City. You know, even if they lost but kept it close, but lost like a game-winning field goal, that's a D. I would have given them, it was really hard for me to give them an F, yet they somehow did it still. So ultimately, that's the report card. Let me know what you guys think. See what if I would have changed. It's definitely a little hypocritical. It's a lot of gray area, yet I still think it's very interesting to maybe at the end of the season do a GPA, even though this was week 6 and it's the first segment of report card. I definitely think it's interesting moving forward to see how teams combat their previous week. You know, does Cleveland keep an A, or does San Francisco move up from an F? My bet is no, yes on those. Anyways, we'll move on to the fourth segment. This one's probably going to be hit on the short form media because it's Power Surge, the top 7 teams in the NFL right now, in my opinion, in Jackson's opinion, as I referenced myself in the third person. Let's dive right into it, starting with number 7, the Buffalo Bills. Look, they're sitting at 4-2 right now. They're just too inconsistent, yet that moment when they're not inconsistent and they're a good team, they play like a top 7 team in the league. And really, they haven't shown me a reason to not put them in this ranking, right? Top 7, it's very niche. It's not even like a third of the league. Yet, I still believe in Buffalo. If I had to put money on them to win a game coming off a bye, I would put my money on them. Josh Allen's a capable quarterback, so we'll have to see how he performs next week because I bet it'll be a better performance. But how does he perform the week after that? I need 3 solid games from Josh Allen, and we just haven't seen that in a while, if ever. So that's something to keep an eye on. Jacksonville, I think they have the more consistent quarterback, which lands them higher on this list. I would say the only thing holding them back is a bona fide win against a real contender. That's the one thing they're missing, yet they're still playing like a top 16. This power surge, right? Power goes, it's constant, right? Some teams power out, some teams power on. And yet that's why Jacksonville's up here is because of the momentum. And if the season were to end right now, they would be a top 3 favorite, in my opinion, to win the Super Bowl. That's how well they are playing right now. Number 5 is Miami, sitting at 5-1. This completes our string of every team up to this point only has 1 loss. Miami, my question mark with Miami is big time games. We haven't seen them win a bona fide game yet, right? They had a chance against the Bills, dropped that. Other than that, they've been playing not really lethal teams. I mean, Miami is a great team. I'm not denying them. They're a top 5 in my opinion, yet they still have yet to win a game. Like if they play the Chiefs and they win, oh, that's a bona fide win. They haven't done that yet. So I still would put my money on Miami to continue their offensive performance, and especially if Jalen Ramsey gets back, I think they're going to be a deadly team, deadly. But for right now, as week 6, I have them at 5. Going up at number 4, a team that does have a signature win is the Detroit Lions. Yes, it was week 1, but that Kansas City win has really uplifted this team, and I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's just the culture, right, of Detroit, and they are playing like a top 4 team right now. I don't see really any flaws with this team. Maybe if they go against a superstar quarterback, can their offense keep up or come back from a deficit in a game? They're run first. Jared Goff is still playing amazing. David Montgomery going down is a question mark, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs not playing last week due to an injury. If he comes back, I think they'll be fine. It's Jahmyr Gibbs' season for those fantasy owners. I know that was pretty bogus, but Detroit is definitely one of the top teams in the NFC and in the league. Continuing with another NFC team, I do have the Philadelphia Eagles. They dropped a spot in my mind. I didn't do this segment last week, but here's why the Eagles are number 3. Their secondary is definitely still a suspect. And if their offense doesn't drop at least 20 points in the game, I think it's going to be hard for them to continue to put victory after victory. The Jets game wasn't necessarily an exception, but I think it's the rule with this team, whereas they need to be good offensively to win games. Now, it's not like their defense is horrible or anything. They got a great front 7, right? Or at least a D-line. They got a great D-line, maybe one of the best in the league. Yet it's their secondary that's been suspect, and I'm not the only one saying this. This is what everyone hounds on Philadelphia for, and it's annoying because, you only gave up 20. Well, you really only gave up like 13 points to the Jets. Jalen Hurts gave them a touchdown, and let them score anyways at the end. So their defense clearly is the problem, but it's not like the end of the world problem. Whereas with Kansas City, I don't see any problem with them, except I would like to see more offensively. I think they lack a little bit of weapons. A Tyreek Hill would fix this team, obviously, but really only having Travis Kelce as your really only inept offensive weapon, obviously Mahomes, but I'm just talking about wide receivers and running backs. They have a carousel of running backs, and they don't have really any standout wide receiver, yet Travis Kelce, best tight end in the league, is good enough for Mahomes. That's why they're 5-1. I'm always going to bet on this team. This team will rarely leave this top 7 unless they lose like 3 in a row. This team may struggle offensively, but if that's their one problem, they're sitting pretty. But one team that hasn't had offensive problems until last week was this 49ers. They've scored 30 points in every game except for last week, which was a weird game, yet they still, in my mind, at full strength, no serious injuries. They'll still be number 1. I think they beat Kansas City and all the teams after them. If they were to play next week, Brock Purdy's still playing good ball. He had one bad game. Relax. And I want to hate on this team so much, but yet I just see the talent and the coaching. There's really no excuse for this team. If this team doesn't at least make the Super Bowl, because anything can happen in the Super Bowl, if they don't make the Super Bowl, it's a failure season. I think 49ers fans would agree. This team has built for a championship. And if they don't do that, that's bad. That's really sad. And it's just like, where do you go from that? I don't understand how this team could get better. Maybe they get better a little bit better or they get better in the secondary. I think that's a step forward, if this season was a complete failure. But other than that, Brandon Ayuk is clearly the breakout wide receiver 1 now. Debo's a gadget guy. Who wouldn't want a Debo on their team? Christian McCaffrey, best running back. I guess the only offensive position you could upgrade on is quarterback, but yet Brock Purdy's been playing well enough to not lose his job. So there's not a guy, I think, in my mind that the 49ers could get right now that would lift their offense to another level. I just don't think there's a guy like that. You're saying, oh, what if they had Tyreek Hill? First off, that's very hypothetical, yet I still don't think there's an option on the market. You're like, what if they trade for Justin Jefferson? First off, I don't think the Vikings would do that, but let's say they do that. How much does this offense change, really? Really? I don't think it changes that much. Because you got Brandon Ayuk, who's still playing like a top 10 wide receiver, and you have Deebo Samuel. Look, their depth would be insane. I think it would make them an A team to an A+ team. It wouldn't necessarily drastically change their offense. Whereas if Justin Jefferson went to maybe, let's say, a New York Jets, that would transform their offense. Having Garrett Wilson and Justin Jefferson, I feel like Zach Wilson could not struggle. He hasn't been playing bad. He would actually be a very good quarterback because of his weapons. That's kind of what Brock Purdy is getting, even though Brock Purdy is clearly playing better than Zach Wilson. I'm not comparing the two, but that's kind of the effect that Justin Jefferson would have on that offense. Whereas if he were to go to this offense, I don't see that much change. Yeah, maybe they may score a touchdown more a game, something like that, or their red zone offense might go up a couple %, but I don't necessarily see a change with this offense, and that is not their problem. I don't know what the problem is. You could say their problem is their special teams and their kicker. It's a rookie kicker who is maybe the best kicker in college history. 49ers will be fine. Kansas City will be fine. Every other team, ginormous question mark. No, I'm just playing. All these teams on this list in the Power Surge are capable right now of winning the Super Bowl in my mind. But we'll have to see how they perform in Week 7 because this list could change. If the teams that lost again, we would see some madness. Anyways, going into our number 5 segment, some dime deals. This segment is pretty much about my journey from like betting dimes every week into seeing how much I can make. And let's dive into it as I pull up my history. I'm not going to say what app because this is not a sponsored segment, but I've noticed I am terrible at sports betting. Let's dive right into it. Our lucky 4 last week, that failed. We bet Chicago plus 2.5, did not hit. We bet Jacksonville -4, that clearly hit. Tampa Bay Bucks plus 3.5, which I think was the worst bet of the week for me. That did not hit, but Baltimore -4 hit. So we bet 50 cents. I think we would have won like $6 or something if it hit. As I flip back to my other, I would have won $6.25 with 50 cents. That would have been a great bet, but it didn't hit. Anyways, moving on. I bet some college games this weekend. This ginormous parlay, 12-leg parlay. I'll say the ones that hit real quick: TCU money line, Central Michigan money line, Utah money line, Toledo, Navy, North Texas, Florida State, Ohio State, Eastern Michigan, and Alabama. All of those hit except South Florida, they lost, and Buffalo University Bulls, they lost. So that was so close to hitting too. And then I had another 6-leg parlay with college football. This one did not do clearly as good as I had Kansas State money line. That hit, but Washington State lost, and Louisville, I think they lost outright, but their -8 did not hit. But I bet Tennessee money line, they won. Oregon plus 3.5, that covered. And then Kansas Jayhawks -3, they lost outright, and so that didn't cover. And then I have a 7-leg parlay in NFL action. Atlanta money line, they lost, but Cincinnati, Houston, Miami all won. 49ers lost, Bears lost, and the Jaguars won. So that one didn't hit. Then I bet the second slate of games playing in the second slate of games. Eagles lost, Bucks lost, Rams won, and Patriots lost. So that was a pretty bad get there. And then I bet some player props on Sunday Night Football against the Bills and Giants. I bet Gabe Davis over half a touchdown. If I bet him to score a receiving touchdown, that did not hit. But I bet this is all in the same parlay, but James Cook over 60 yards rushing, he hit that, and Josh Allen over 2 passing touchdowns, or 1.5 passing touchdowns, that hit. And then I bet Stephon Diggs over half of a receiving touchdown, that did not hit, so I lost that bet. I bet Gabe Davis to be the first touchdown scorer, guess what, that did not hit. But you know what hit? I finally hit a bet, yo. I finally hit a bet. It was Texas Rangers versus Houston Astros, a bet under 9 at the total score, and Texas Rangers plus 1.5, that covered. I'm feeling good. So that was good to see. But then I had some really dumb bets. I bet 2 different parlays. The first one was 3 different players hitting home runs: Seager, Lowe, and Alvarez. That did not hit. And I bet another one with Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, and Aroldis Garcia. It was my first time betting baseball. I was thinking big, so don't blame me, even though that is a very, very dumb bet. And that's about all I have right now. In action right now as I speak is Game 2, Texas Rangers against the Astros. I have Rangers money line, and then I have the Phillies winning against the Diamondbacks in Game 1 money line. That would be 50 cents. That would pay out $1.54, which is not bad. Not bad for dealing some dimes. As that ends our Dime Deals segment, it's just a nice little kept up. Right now I have $1.64 in my bank account. So we'll keep that in mind for next episode. Our goal at the end of the NFL season would be, what's a reasonable goal? $20? I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I'll go with I'll say $20 for right now. I was saying 50, but I realized how bad I am at this, so that's just not going to be a thing. Anyways, going into our final segment, this was going to be Lucky 4, because I want to end every episode with Lucky 4. Just those odds haven't come out yet, and some apps that I have, like my real app that I use for like scores and stuff like that, those lines are absolutely poo. They have like the Saints favored against the Jags on Thursday Night Football, so I'll wait on that. Make sure to subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching this. Make sure to follow, because I'll be posting my Lucky 4 pretty much everywhere on social media, so make sure to follow for that, and some other bonus features for sure that I'll be posting, some reactions to the games and stuff, especially on Twitter at AJU Sports. That's where you get all my instant reactions with some NFL content on Sundays. Anyways, going into our final segment, Headline Horizons. These are some predictions I have for next week, week 7, as we look forward. Miami win. All right, so let's start. I almost just teased the whole thing. All right. The first headline: Miami wins shootout versus Eagles in the battle of air versus land. I think this game could be very high scoring, even though I wouldn't say necessarily 30s are high scoring, but I could see this game being like a 35-31, 38-31 type of game. I think Miami pulls it out just because I see more consistency with their offense, even though I don't think the Eagles will struggle as much on offense as they did against the Jets. Yet I still have Miami winning this, and this will be their bona fide win that I was talking about in the Power Surge. They lack that bona fide win. This will easily do it for them. If the Eagles win, I think it's more of the Eagles are good, Miami's not, whereas if Miami wins, it would be like, oh, Miami's really good, Eagles are still really good. So it's definitely some hypocritical analysis there, but I think that's what we'll see in the media, but yet Miami will win that game in a shootout. 2, Ravens take flight against Lions, become contender. The Ravens didn't make my Power Surge, and yet they are a 4-2 team. So they clearly, one, have the quarterback to be a top 7 team, and they have a coach to be a top 7 team. Yet that still hasn't happened. They just lack kind of the wow factor as of right now. And I think with this, if they beat the Lions, who are a contender in my eyes, would instantly boost them up from a pretender to a contender, because the Lions are a very good team, and I could see this being a game the Lions lose. Yet I think the Ravens would need to win it rather than the Lions would lose it, if that makes sense. Like, the Lions aren't going to give the game away. The Ravens have to earn the victory. Number 3, Browns keep pushing to win the North. Beat Colts. Look, the Browns, the best thing they can do right now is win in week 7. They need to back up this victory with another victory. That North is very winnable. Now I have the Ravens winning. So that means the Browns could not take first place. But if the Browns win, they could take first place potentially, and that would be very exciting for Browns fans. I predicted them to come in last. Isn't that incredible? They are completely surpassing my expectations for this team, especially if Deshaun Watson comes back and really starts to play his type of ball. He doesn't need to be throwing for 300 yards on average. I think he needs to average maybe 270 with 2 touchdowns a game. Maybe no interception next week if he plays. He should be back. He tweeted about it, so we should see. Going on to our 4th headline, Patriots are defeated at the Battle of Foxborough. They surrender the season. Look, the Patriots have just been going downhill all the time this season. And really, really culminated last week, losing to the Raiders against a former coach. This team is just not good. There's no factor where I'm like, I would want that guy on my team. Right now, with their injuries, there's no guy I think I would want on my team from the Patriots. I'm being dead serious. I don't think there's any real superstar in that team. Matthew Judon, Christian Gonzalez, they're injured. I'm not talking about them. They're great players. But right now, this team going into next week, sheesh, they play the Bills. It's going to be brutal. It is going to be a massacre. And so sad for Patriots fans. It's not like they've won 6 Super Bowls in the last 20 years. Oh, that's so sad. I'm literally wearing a Cowboys, bro. We haven't won. So I can talk right now. Actually, I kind of can't. Anyways, that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is the Patriots, this is the game that'll end their season. You might say, oh, it was against the Raiders. No. They'll get absolutely destroyed by the Bills, because the Bills need to back up that horrendous performance against the Giants. They won, but it was still horrendous. So they need to back it up. And I think this is an opportunity for them to destroy a divisional rival and really take their foot off the brake and put it back on the gas. 5. NFC South takes the crown as the worst division. The only thing holding this entire division back from all having losing records is that the Atlanta Falcons play the Bucks. Bucks have a winning record, 3-2, and the Falcons have a 500 record. So it's impossible for all the teams in the division to have a losing record, there's just no way. So, but I still think they'll be the worst division. None of these teams are really contenders for the playoffs. The Bucks are playing the best ball out of all of them, even though they just put up 6 points in a matchup. They scored the least amount of points last week. This is before Monday Night Football, so it's definitely, they scored less points than the Broncos. So there's just no real wow factor, unfortunately, for this division. It's kind of back-to-back years with the worst division. So you had the NFC East be the worst division. Now they're the NFC Beast, even though the Giants are underperforming. Now you have the NFC South be the worst division, and I think they'll take the crown next week. Anyways, that will wrap it up for this episode of The Whistle. This was kind of a unified week episode, covered past and future a little bit. Let me know what you guys think of this format, if I need to change anything. I'm going to be posting some clips of these segments onto other social medias like a TikTok. I'm not going to upload the whole episode. If you want the whole episode, it's going to be here on YouTube. I'm going to try every week to post. This is fun to do, especially because I think I'm right than most people. So anyways, I'm signing out. I'll see you guys next week. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for some live reactions to some games. Cowboys play the Chargers before I'm recording this, and this will be posted probably on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so we'll know if the Cowboys won or not. Do I think they have the potential to win? I think they have the potential to win and lose. I think the Chargers are a great offensive team, and that's kind of, I think, the kryptonite for the Cowboys. If it turns into a shootout, can their offense, hang? I think they have the weapons to do it. I think they have the quarterback to do it, even though Dak hasn't necessarily lit up the scoreboard or the score box offensively. We'll have to see. Betting line, I think it's Dallas -2.5. That's such a whack line, but I think I'll take it. I think they established the run against the weak Chargers defense, even though Dak will be a little bit conservative throwing the ball. They don't need to win by 20. They don't even need to win by 10. I think a win by 3 or 7 would be definitely a victory in their win column. Like, that would be at least a B performance, which is good enough. The Cowboys just need to get back in the win column before entering the bye, because after the bye, they got a little bit of a gauntlet playing the Rams and then the Eagles, so they need to get some things right, get healthy. We'll have to see, but for the Chargers standpoint, they could use a win here for sure. They're kind of getting a little lost in their own division, and that AFC wild card, which they'll probably be fighting for at the end of the season. This could be a loss that could get away from them. They're at home, prime time. Austin Eckler's back. You get one of your weapons back. Obviously, Mike Williams is done for the year, but I think Trayvon Diggs, Mike Williams cancel each other out for this game. So we'll have to see. I think it'll be a very interesting ball game. Best of the week potential. I don't know if that's going to beat the Browns 49ers game. That game was a nail biter, but we'll have to see. So anyways, let me know who you think is going to win Monday night, or I guess that one's already gone. So that's kind of awkward. Let me know who wins the Thursday night football game between the Saints and the Jags. I think this one's pretty easy, but I'd love to see what you guys have to think in the comments below. Anyways, right now, all you have to do is subscribe to stay a fan. Anyways, I'll see you guys next episode.